As promised, here we are in a video which will be me demonstrating how I started and built a big chunk, quite a big chunk, of this lab assignment concerning GUIs, JavaFX, and Lambda functionality. So my goal here is to basically take you to build the majority of what you're seeing on screen up until here. Now you can imagine once you get this far, the bottom two buttons are essentially the same as the top two buttons. So I'm going to give you just about everything you need to do this. Just follow along with me, pause the video if you get stuck, and we're going to get this done together. So you've seen it, when I hit a celebrity, it says their catchphrase or just something funny. Of course, I want you to get creative, use your own celebrities, your own catchphrases. You can use more buttons and make a different layout if you'd like, but I'm going to take you through what I've shown you in the instructions in the previous video based on this format right here. So I'm going to have a border pane with a V box on top to create this, and then two H boxes, one in the center and one in the bottom. Each one of those will have a button in it, and the top will have a title and a text field. So without further ado, let's dive into this. I am going to start out by making a new file, and I'm going to hit JavaFX main class. I believe we've discussed this before, but this is much like when you make a main class in Java. Just a regular one. You never make a Java class and then write in the main manually. You always press Java main class when you know you need a main method, because it works faster, right? It's less work for us to do. So making an fx main class will give us a lot of built-in functionality, such as an anonymous function, which will change to a lambda. It will give us a pane, which will also change. It will give us the start method, which is overridden already. It's just going to help us out a little bit, and we'll make some changes as we go through this. So I'm going to call this lab assign underscore GUI. You obviously call this lab assign whatever number this is, underscore your last name. So here we are. I'll clean up my code just a little bit here so we can see my screen. Okay, so here we go. So the first thing I want to do here is just point out what this has given me. This has given me a very simple program with a hello world button. When I press it, it says hello world. This is in a stack pane, which I'm probably going to change. And this right here is the functionality to say hello world, currently in an anonymous method or an anonymous function. I'm going to hit the light bulb here and change that to a lambda for simplicity. There we go. I don't need the button text to say anything, so I'm going to remove that. I do not want this to be a stack pane. I prefer border panes, and I already told you that we'll be working with a border pane. So change that. I'm going to add the import for the border pane, like so. And why don't we change the word root to pane, just because that's what we've been used to. Now, because we're using a border pane, there's no reason to use the get children and add the button here. And when we're setting the scene, we can probably, too, get away with just adding the empty pane for now. Okay, now the title should not be Hello World. It should be something like Celebrity Picker, or whatever you choose, right? The whole point of this is to have some fun. Now, this is a pretty big GUI, as you can see. So let's make some adjustments here. Why don't we play with the width and maybe the height if necessary. So we can take that stage that we're working with, and you can set the width or the height like so. I'm going to set the width to be 500 and see what that looks like. So now it's 500. Obviously it is a little bit deep. So let me go ahead and set the width too. So if I do a primary stage dot set the height to, let's set that to 400, see what kind of shape we get. We may play around with this later, or let's just make it a nice square of 400 by 500. That looks pretty good and should resemble this. Maybe a little bit off, but we can deal with that later if need be. Okay, so this is what we have so far. Remember, you can pause if we're going a little too fast or rewind. That is the beauty of this video. So one of the requirements, maybe a little strange, but it was that I don't want you to be able to resize the window because we don't want to deal with the hassle of binding items. So I don't want someone to be able to resize this. The window should be perfectly fit. They shouldn't be able to maximize it or anything like that. So in order to do that, all you have to do is a primary stage dot set resizable. And you can pass a boolean of false in there. Now, once you've done that, you do see that the maximize button has disappeared and you can no longer stretch the window. It is stuck to this size, which we can change programmatically, but the user cannot change themselves. That's just to make our lives a little bit easier for the purpose of this assignment. So something else I mentioned is that this is the structure I have. I have a border pane. You guys know a border pane has a top, center, left, right, and bottom. You can only take 5 elements, but the loophole there is if you throw another pane on the pane, you can create more elements. So we kind of want this structure, right? This is what we're going for. Now the top of our pane obviously has 2 items in there. It has what looks to be a title or a label and a text field. Now how do we get 2 items in the top when the top of a border pane only allows 1? Yep, we use nesting. We're going to nest a pane within the top of our border pane. And we can use a vertical box to do that because you can see these are being lined down vertically. So I'm going to walk you through this, and let's just start up here. I'm just going to move some things around. Okay, so I put my border pane up there, and now let's make our H and V boxes. So we're going to have a V box, and I'll just call this V box equals new V box, and then I'll create a H box as well. H box, and we're going to have 2 of these, as we know from our layout. So I am going to create 2 H boxes like so, and then we will import, of course we will, the fx functionality for a H box and a V box. So these are my 3 boxes, and once again, that is just to show you that this is the vertical box right here, this is our first horizontal box, and this is our second horizontal box here. And this is where these will be placed. So if we run this currently, we're still going to be presented with this blank box, which is not great. So let's try work on the top right now. What we're trying to replicate is this where it says click as a lab, and then it has the text field, which we cannot type in. So let's work on that together. So let's create the top of the pane, which will be the V box. Now in order to do this, let's add a title. You could also use a label, but let's use a text title. So I'll say text title equals new text. And for now, I'll just write click a celeb. Remember, if you have something you would like to write, I would love to see your creativity, your humor, whatever you decide to put in there is going to be fun. Make sure you import JavaFX, not AWT. That will cause you issues. So there is my text. Now let's add a text field. So we can say text field tf equals new text field. Now inside of a text field, we can just put an empty string because nothing should go in there just yet, and import the JavaFX functionality like so. Now hopefully you're with me that if I run my program, we get a whole lot of nothing yet again, right? Because, why? We didn't add it to the pane, right? We have not added it to the pane. So let's work on that. So what I'm going to do, knowing that this button is also here, let's keep the button for now because it does have this. But what we can do is we will come down here and we will add content to the pane. Okay, we're going to add content to the pane. Now again, I'm going to show you the design because you might be thinking, well, we need to add this and this to the pane. That's true, but remember what I said, this content is within a vertical box. So we're actually adding the click as a celeb and the text field to the vertical box first, and then we'll put the vertical box on the top of the pane to create the illusion that we have 2 items on top, when really it's just one, the vertical box, which contains 2. Right? Design is a little crazy, but that's how it works. So the first thing we're going to do is we will add items to the pane. So let's add items to the VBox. That's the first thing we should do here. And in order to do that, we can take our VBox, which is VBox, because there's only one of them, and we can get children. And we could add them one at a time, but we already have both, so why don't we just add all? And the nodes we have, I believe, were our title and our text field. I added them in this order because I want the title on top and the text field below. This is kind of flowing downwards, so whatever you put first will be your topmost item. So now, if we run this, we still get a whole lot of nothing. How do we change that whole lot of nothing into a little bit of something? Finally, add items to the pane itself, which is the main scene. So we can take our pane and we can start to add items to this. So if we set the top of our pane, because it's a border pane, to the VBox, then what we're thinking is everything that the vertical box contains, the title and the text field, which are these nodes, should be in the VBox. The VBox is then placed on the top of the pane, and the top of the pane is set to the scene. The scene, of course, is set to the stage, and right here, and we should get something. Yeah, it doesn't look great, but if we put them oh, that's not the right one. If we were to put them side by side, you would see that it is starting to look a little bit like it. Now I can type in this text field, and that's not good. So let's fix that first, right? Because the instructions do tell us that the text field is non-editable, meaning we cannot edit the text field. So a little bit of research would tell us if you go up to the text field and you see what it can do, there is actually a set editable option, which defaults to true. Now if we change that true to a false, then when we run this, the text box is somewhat grayed out, and I can't type in there. The text box will be filled based on the button we press, and that's the whole idea behind this. So let me show you. In the actual assignment, I can't type in here. When I click on Gordon Ramsay, it says Gordon Ramsay up here, but I didn't have control over that. And when I click on Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, that is up there, but I don't have control over that. That's being done through the functionality of us pressing the button. So let's continue on. Okay, so we can no longer edit that. The next problem is probably that the text itself, if I remember right, doesn't look great, right? It doesn't look great at all. So again, I really encourage you to get creative with this, but I'm going to show you how to set the font. You could do a title, just picking up here, that is title.set font, and I'm going to take a static class of font, so font.font, and now you can place whatever font you would like. The way I always describe this, and I have described this in previous videos, is if it exists in Microsoft Word, it exists in JavaFX. So everybody's favorite font, of course, right, is Comic Sans MS. Now you can go with any font you would like, but why not go with the meme font, as they call it, and we will set the weight of the font. Let's make sure we can do that. Font weight dot bold, that's just bolding our text. Again, you've done this in Word, we're now doing it programmatically through code, and let's set the font to be 40. So this line of code right here allows us to change the font to this font. It is bold, and it is 40. Now if I run this, it's starting to look a lot better. Now we do have a few instances of this open, so let me close a couple, but you can see a big difference here. Well, this clicker celeb is centered, and it does look like this is kind of, they're hugging each other, right? So let's work on changing those. Very minor details, but let's change those. Well, we could center the title and we could center the text field, but why do two things when we could do one? So if we come back down to where we make our vertical box, or where we are adding things to it right here, what we can do before we add to it, or after, I don't think it matters, we could do a vbox.set alignment of a value. Now the value we're going to do is the default, which is center. So this says whatever goes in my vertical box should be centered within that box. Let's take a look. Just like that, we now have centered text within the box. That is an old version, so I'll run this again to show you that it is centered. But we also want, is this a 3-step process? Yes. We also want to add some spacing between there. So let's get to that next. So currently our spacing issue is actually not too bad. So maybe just a little bit of space. We could say something like vbox.set and spacing. If we set this to like 500, it's going to be a little, really bad. We can't even see the text field anymore. So if you play around with those values and we say, well, how about 20? Does that look any better? Yeah, well, we might not even need 20. How about 10? 10 seems pretty nice. Okay, so that's good. This is our vertical box, done and dusted. We can now move on to our horizontal box, which is where it's going to get a little more fun and interesting, because we get to add images to this part. So let us start off by talking about horizontal box 1, which is basically going to be this right here, which contains these two celebrities and buttons. So we're going to work on this part together right now. Now we already have the hbox one right here, but we need to build some content to put in the box. As you saw in the example, we need two buttons with images on them. So I'm going to add some content here. This was create the top of the pane. Let's add a comment right here. Create content for hbox1, and this will be 2 buttons with images, okay, just so we know where we are. So this button right here can be our first button, and I'll just put MJ button for Michael Jackson button. I have to change this right here to MJ button as well. And of course, it's not going to say hello world. Let's just change that to say Michael Jackson for now. So when we run this, that shouldn't have changed anything, and the button isn't on there, so I can't even test it, but we'll be adding that very shortly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some images here. So these are the images that we'll have for our buttons. And again, this is why I recommend watching the SpongeBob video first of all, because it really gives you a clearer understanding of how to add images to a program. Adding images is a 2-step process. You add the image and then you add the image view. The image is the image itself, like a printed photo, and the image view is the frame that you often put a photo in. So let's grab those photos first of all. So I'll say image MJ, because this will be an image of Michael Jackson, equals new image. Okay, we'll have to import the FX, not the AWT, like so. Now that's telling me that, hey, I can't make an image if you don't give me a link, right? So we'll give it a blank link for now, and we'll give it a base size of 150 by 150 and false. This is just for rounded and smoothed edges, but this is the height and the width of the image, which is going to fit into our button nicely, like a nice square. Now we need a picture of Michael Jackson, because right now, if I actually add this to the pane, you're going to see, let me show you. It's going to be a lot easier to show you. So we are going to add items to hbox1 right here. And in order to do that, all we have to do is take our hbox. So hbox1 dot get children. And we can we'll add all, because we know in the future we'll have more than one. But right now, all we have is that MJ button. So there we go. Okay. Now, of course, we have to perform adding it to the center of our box right here. And this will be our hbox1, like so. So we should see a button on our screen right now. When we run this, it crashes. Let's take a look at why that is. Now, my guess for the reason it's crashing is when I run it, crashes before anything happens. It does say that it's an invocation target, so I'm guessing that it's trying to load this image, which is nothing, and it can't do that. So we need to get an image, right? We need to get a picture of MJ, Michael Jackson, whoever your celebrity is. Please get creative and pick your own, but this is how I do it. I jump over to Google, I just type in Michael Jackson, see some images. We can go to images right here, and we can just pick an image. So we say, okay, how about this one? And we'll copy the image address. Make sure it's not too long, because long image addresses can cause problems, but it's good to make the mistakes. Let's see if see, this is a pretty long one, so it really kind of doesn't make this program look great. When we run this, it worked, right, because the program didn't crash, but clearly I'm not seeing the image here. But the link did work. So just to show you that again, I found an image, I clicked on it, right-click, copy image address, jumped over to NetBeans, pasted that image address in the quotation marks here, and it is 150 by 150. Now when we run the program, you saw that it is not showing us the image, and that's because we have the image, but now we need to place it in that frame. I believe it should have the functionality of saying Michael Jackson, and it does, and that's because our Lambda, which was built in from when we created the JavaFX main class, right here, is working. But let's add the image view to actually see this working. So when we create the button, we can make that button a little nicer. So we can take the button, which is MJ button, and we can press period. Now buttons have a method called setGraphic, and we can set this graphic to be a new image of Michael Jackson, because that's the image we have. So if I say new image view, and in parentheses, I just put MJ right here, it seems to work. Now I could create a new image view object and load it in here. This is just a quick way to do it. Now it's telling me that I do have to import the image view object, as we do with everything in FX and GUIs. So let's do that. There we go. So now the image view, which is MJ, which is this image, is placed onto the button. That's us placing the photo into the frame. When I run this, we should see it, fingers crossed, and we do. So when I press this, it says Michael Jackson. If you want to change that to something like I do in the example, I say like moonwalking, then of course that will now say moonwalking. Now, all we need to do is add a second button to this horizontal box here. So let's go ahead and do that next. So I believe we had the rock in the second one, so I'll stick with that. I'll create a new image, or why don't we just copy and paste this line? So here is a new image, and I'll just call this the rock. 150 by 150 is the same because we want the same size same size button for each image. Now I just have to jump over here and find a picture of the rock. So if I type in the rock, here we go. Let's go with any picture. It really doesn't matter. We're just hoping that the link works for us. So I'm going to copy the image address. That might be a bit long, so let's go with another one. How about this one? Okay, we'll copy image address. Still looks a little long, but we'll test it. Going to paste it in here. It's even longer than the last one, as we saw. All we can do is test the program, hope it works. It does. Okay, so that's a good sign. So what we're going to do is we can just copy this functionality, right? And I'll add comments here, Michael Jackson button. And then here, this can be the rock button. These comments are just to help me stay structured with this program. This could be rock button. This will be rock button.setGraphic to be the rock, which should be tying into this image right here. And we'll change this to just be, can you smell what the rock is cooking? Right, just like that, quick copy and paste, changed it to this. Now, obviously, using methods and classes and objects would be a lot more efficient. But the purpose of this assignment, the purpose of this module, is to learn how to make graphics and have some fun with it. So that's why I'm doing it a little bit inefficient, but it's working. Now, I'm still not seeing the rock here, and that's because we do have to add him to the pane. So that would be right here. Remember, we could change this to an add all method, and we could put the rock in here. Was it rock button? Yes, okay. So now that the rock button is in the add all method of hbox1, and hbox1 has already been added to the pane, there he is. Our problem? These buttons are too close together. So what we learned in the previous example with the VBox, where we set the spacing to be 10, you might have to do that again with this and kind of find the sweet spot. When you're coding programmatically instead of with a GUI itself, like point and click, you kind of have to mess around with values and see what you can figure out. So here's our hbox. Let's do a hbox1, and then we can set the spacing on this. Let's try 50 and see what that does. Now that did create some separation, but you can see it wasn't enough. So let's go with 150. That might be too much. No, it looks pretty perfect. I mean, there's a little bit of room on the side, but this is where you can just play around. It really doesn't have to be spot on perfect. Maybe 160, and then we'll call that day if that works. Yeah, okay, that's pretty good. So this. Oh, do you see what happened? They both say, can you smell what the rock is cooking? So let's figure what that out. That is, oh, that's because this is MJ button. It should be rock button, right? Copying and pasting can cause lots of issues. I didn't do that on purpose, but I'm glad it actually showed up because this overrid the functionality that I already made up here. So if I run this one more time, there we go. It is now working. Okay, so we're pretty much done, but what I want to do next is just write a method so I don't have to do this every time. And we want to add that functionality where when we press the button, it actually goes into the top here. See that? We're missing this right now. So if I demo that for you, you can see that nothing's going up there. We need to make that happen, and I'm going to do that in the form of a method. So when button is pressed, we call this method, okay? So this can be a public and probably a void method because it's not going to return anything. Public void button pressed. Now if you press a button, we're going to need a few pieces of information. I'm going to need the text field you're working with because I want to put the celebrity's name in there. I want a string of the celebrity's name, so I'll just say celeb name, and a string of M, which can be the message that celebrity is going to say. Now, whenever this happens, we can take the text field and we can set the text to be the celebrity's name, right? That's nice and easy, hopefully, that we take the text field you pass as an argument and I set that text field to whatever the celebrity's name is. So when I'm pressing Gordon Ramsay, what's happening is we get this text field and we place inside of it whatever text is tied to the string of the celebrity's name, Gordon Ramsay, and it does the same for all of them. Now the message is what's being printed here, and we already have that functionality, but we can simplify it by, instead of printing the message up all the time, we can just do an S out of celeb name to look like they're saying the message themselves to print that message. So whenever you call this button press method, it's going to do everything. It's going to put the celebrity's name in the text field, it's going to say the celebrity's name in the system.out, and it's going to print their message. So we can simplify that by now, instead of saying moonwalking, we could just call button pressed, which will give us a syntax issue, because button pressed requires a few things. It requires a text field, a celebrity's name, and a message. So if we give it our text field of TF, celebrity name of Michael Jackson, and a message of moonwalking, this functionality should all be done. Now let's do the same down here. If we call button pressed in the rock, and we give it the text field, the rock, and this, you can see that these two are both calling button pressed, acting differently each time. Let's see if it works. Michael Jackson does print up here, we can't type in there. Michael Jackson moonwalking is down here, and the rock is all working. It's looking great. So from here, all we really have to do, and this is kind of where I'm going to leave you to finish this, but I'll show you where, is I'm going to need you to add those bottom boxes. Now we just did that with the top, right? So what you're looking at is two images. You just need two more. And then the functionality for those images are right here. So if I tell you that this is HBox1, and then I'm asking you to create the functionality for HBox2, you basically just need this, right? It can be copied down here and pasted. I need two images that tie to that, celebrities of your choice. And then last but not least, you would add items to HBox2. So I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to do that myself, and I'll show you the final result, but this part is going to be up to you. If I run into any issues along the way, I will mention those when I unpause the video, so you'll see me in just a second. And here we are back. When I run the program, you can see that it did work, right? And this took a few minutes of just some copying and pasting and changing some things around, but when I press Michael Jackson, it comes up here, it does print, Gordon Ramsay does the same, Queen does the same, Rock does the same, everything's in working order. Again, this is a very repetitive process, but copying and pasting, you have to take slow, because otherwise you might end up with an issue like I did, where the Queen ended up here and overrid Michael Jackson, and etc, etc. I've also frozen my screen right here to show you that you are setting HBox2 to be on the bottom, because another mistake I made with copying and pasting was I kept that in the center, and that did cause the following issue, which you don't want to do, right? That's overriding. So this should be set bottom, which will give you this effect. Now I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with. I hope you appreciate this video. I hope this is enough to get you to the finishing result, and great work.